Welcome to the Jamesburg Presbyterian Church. Today is Tuesday, January the 18th, 2022. Today we're taking a look at the Gospel according to Luke in chapter 15. We know this parable by the name, the parable of the prodigal son. What we should probably call it is the parable of outrageous behavior, or parable of the dysfunctional family. So with that in mind, we'll start. First thing I'm going to say is it's almost impossible, really, to separate the parable of the dysfunctional family from the two previous parables. Chapter 15 really is meant to be considered all at one time. The first parable in chapter 15 is a woman loses a coin. She tears up her whole house looking for that coin and finally finds it. And then she has a party celebrating the fact that she found the coin. Probably all of us know the experience of losing our keys, the car key, the house key, losing our keys, or maybe misplacing something else that's important, and we tear up everything in our house trying to find it. I know that I do that from time to time, misplace my keys, and sometimes I discover them in places exactly where I left them, but had forgotten them. All of us have had that experience. But here's the thing in this parable. The woman goes out and takes a bank loan in order to celebrate the fact that she found her 25-cent piece. Think about that. It's outrageous behavior. The second parable, if we were listening to it back in those days and we knew anything about shepherding, we would also say that is outrageous behavior. A shepherd has 100 sheep. One of them turns up missing, so that the shepherd leaves the 99 sheep to go find the one sheep that is lost, the one lamb. When the shepherd finds the one lamb, he is really, really happy. Now, what we know of shepherds is that we would never leave the 99. If one is lost, it has to return on its own, or it's been eaten, but we're sure not going to leave the 99 to any predator that wants to come along and have lamb supper. It's outrageous behavior. You just do not do that. You're there to protect the many, not the one. So again, the parable is about a shepherd going out and finding the one lost lamb. Outrageous behavior. The parable that we're taking a look at today, though, is the parable of the prodigal son, the waiting father, and the older brother. There are three characters in this parable that we're told about, and all three of them really have to be mentioned because all three of them play an important role. When we delete one of the characters or two of the characters by calling it the parable of the prodigal son, we're only concentrating on 1/3 of the story. So what happens is we're told in the very beginning there was a man who had two sons. It's interesting the way Luke writes this story. He is being very deliberate in the way he's doing character development. A man has two sons. It doesn't say a father has two sons. It says a man has two sons. It doesn't say at this point in time that the two sons are brothers because, as I said, this is a dysfunctional family. The one son, the younger son, comes to the father and says, I want my inheritance. I want it now. In other words, he's treating his father as if the father has died. In this time period, this is, again, outrageous behavior. It is so disrespectful in that culture to go to your parent and say, I want what's mine after you're dead. The fact that the father gives in to the son is even more outrageous. The father takes and gives the son the property. Actually, he liquidates the assets and gives him the cash. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and went off to a distant country. Distant country is code for a Gentile nation. Again, the younger son is being disrespectful. He treats the father as if the father's dead. He's now treating his culture as if the culture means nothing to him. His religion means nothing to him. He's gone off to a Gentile country. And we are told, and this is important, that he squandered his wealth in wild living. We're not told anything about that wild living. That comes up later on in the parable. But he squanders all of his money in wild living. We can only imagine what that would amount to. Maybe for all we know, it could be just going out to expensive restaurants every night, living in an expensive hotel every night. But he manages to go through everything until he has nothing. And then what happens, that there's a famine in the country, and he finds himself to be impoverished. He becomes a homeless person. So he decides to hire himself out again to a Gentile. So he's actually treating his employer better than he treats his father. He goes out and gets hired to take care of pigs. Now, from a Jewish perspective, taking care of pigs is the lowest form of life that you could possibly get to. There are a number of rabbinic things about taking care of pigs. It's an abomination to the Jewish audience. And this goes back to Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14. Taking care of pigs is the worst thing. He even is willing to eat what the pigs are eating, and probably does. We're told that he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. I'm sure that as he gave the pigs their food, he was also eating some of that food. And then we're told that he finally comes to his senses. He finally realizes the mistake that he has made, finally realizes how he has treated his father. And he says, and this is important, the language is important, how many of my father's hired people have food to spare? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Hire me and treat me as one of your hired hands. So he got up and went to his father. That completes the first part of the story. The second part of the story is about the father. The father apparently has been sitting by the window of the house, looking out over the road every single day, waiting for the son to return. When he sees the son coming up the driveway, the long driveway, he gets up and he runs out to meet his son. Now, for you and me, this would be logical. It would be not a big deal, except that in this culture, for an older man to run, it's very undignified. The father is acting in a humiliating way at this point in time, running to his son, the son who has treated him as if he has died. Keep that in mind. We're told that the father is filled with compassion. He threw his arms around his son and kissed him. The son begins the rehearsed speech, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And now the father calls out to the servants, quick, we're going to have a party. Bring out the best robe, bring out a ring, put it on his hand, bring out sandals for his feet, kill the fatted calf. We're going to celebrate. Here's something to remember. He's already divided all of his estate. The younger son would get 1/3 of the estate. The older son would get 2/3 of the estate, or a double portion. That's what the law read. So all that the father has at this point in time has been pledged to the older son. So the father, even though he has the ability to make decisions about the portion that he still has, technically it belongs to the older son. It's not his to do with whatever he wants, but here he is doing with it whatever he wants. So he gives to the younger son that which belongs to the older son, and they begin to have a feast. The older son comes in. Now we get into part 3 of the story. The older son comes in from the field, and he hears the music. He hears the voices and we're even told he hears dancing, and he calls to one of the servants and says, "What's going on here?" And the servant says, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound." And we're told the other brother became angry and refused to go in. So once again, the father goes out to the other son, the older son, and the older son says, "Look here, buddy." He doesn't say the word father. There's no relationship there. Dysfunctional family. Look here. Listen to me. In the Revised Standard Version, the word is translated listen, but in the New International Version, it's look here. And he says, all these years I've worked for you as if I was a slave, and you never even gave me a goat to celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf. Remember what in the first part of the story, we're told that he squanders the wealth that he has, but we're not told how. So the question we have, or we could bring to this part of the story, is how does the older son know that the younger son has spent money on prostitutes? Or is he making a bitter accusation, unfounded? He doesn't know the real way in which the younger son has squandered the money, but he makes an accusation here. The father says to the older son, "My son." So the older son reveals that he doesn't have any respect for his father. The younger son treated the father as if the father was dead, but at least referred to him as father. So neither of these sons had much of a relationship with the father. The younger son maybe a little bit more, but the older son, not at all. He says, "My son." So he establishes the relationship. You are always with me, and everything I have is yours. True statement. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours, again establishing the relationship, was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So the father is the one who is working hard to establish relationships. The two brothers don't even have a relationship with each other or much of a relationship. And certainly they don't have much of a relationship or respect for the father. But the father, again, does outrageous behavior. You have a son that has spent the inheritance, his share of the inheritance, and yet gets something back, almost being rewarded for bad behavior, and then there's a party to celebrate his coming back in. Jesus leaves the story at this point in time, never says whether the older brother goes in and celebrates, never says whether the older brother is reconciled with the younger brother, never talks about the relationship, but just leaves it at this: we had to celebrate because your brother was lost but is found. Here's the point to these stories. In the event we haven't figured it out, you and I are one of the brothers. Which one are we? Are we the one that squanders the inheritance, treats the father as if the father is dead, goes off and tries to live our lives on our own, ends up completely messing things up in our lives, and then finds it necessary to come back home? Or are we the older brother, bitter, begrudging the father of everything, angry, feeling as if we have been there for the father and the father hasn't treated us well? And by the way, who is the father? In case you haven't figured it out, it's God. God is the father in this story. God has outrageous behavior toward you and me. That's that unconditional love that I've been talking about throughout my ministry. God's love for us is unconditional. even when we mess up our lives, even when we totally ruin things for ourselves, God is waiting at the window, waiting for us to return, waiting for us to walk down that long and winding road, as Paul McCartney described it. God is there waiting for us to walk down that road and come back home. Come back to where God is, and God will celebrate our return. And God will go out, leave the house, go out to the older brother, the bitter older brother that believes that that he has been there all along for God. Maybe this is a person in the church, maybe this is a good example. Person joins the church, they're new to the church. Meanwhile, another person grew up in that church. It's their church. They have their own pew. The family sat in that pew. There are long memories, and kind of bitter that now this new person has walked into the church, and all the attention goes to the new person. What about the attention to the older member that's been there all along? That's what this parable is about. Or it's about us being bitter in our lives and believing that God owes us something. God doesn't owe us anything. God gives us something. Unconditional love. God's love for both of his sons was in this parable. The father's love for both of his sons was unconditional. He probably knew that the older son was kind of bitter and doing things because the son felt he had to. So the question is, who are we in the parable? In all of these parables that Jesus teaches, we are supposed to see ourselves as one of the characters. Who are we in this parable? Or who are we most like? Maybe it's not an exact description, but maybe it is a close description of who we are. Who are we? And can we love the brother? Can we love the sister that we have, regardless of what they have done in life, regardless of where they've been, regardless of their journey? Can we love that person just as God loves us? That's the question. In this dysfunctional family, we find that there were a lot of problems, but we live in a dysfunctional world. We live in a culture that's dysfunctional. We live in a society that's dysfunctional. Politics makes us dysfunctional. One political party doesn't like the other political party, and it's pretty bitter at times. We've got to get over that. That's what this parable is saying. We've got to get over that. We live different kinds of ways, but the truth of the matter is, in the end, we are all brothers and sisters. I think it's interesting in noting that there's no sister that's mentioned. There's no mother that's mentioned. Were they characters in this imaginary father's life? Possibly, but that's not what's important. The importance is the three characters that are here. Jehoiakim Jeremias once said, repentance means learning to say, Father, again, and returning to the Heavenly Father's arms. I know that we don't like to use exclusive language, but I think in this parable it's important to make that distinction. One of the commentators said that one of the things that we learn early in life is to demand our rights before we learn to value relationships. And this is what this parable is all about. The younger son is demanding his rights. He wants what is due him upon the father's death. The older son is demanding his rights. He believes that he is entitled to things at this point in time. The father has correctly figured out that what's really important are the relationships. And you and I need to discover that or rediscover that also. What's important in life is not as much our rights as it is our relationships. And as a matter of fact, I would even dare say that if we get the relationship factored down correctly, we have our rights. The rights are there. So think about this. All of these parables that come about because of the Pharisees grumbling that Jesus was eating with tax collectors. He was eating with the lost. He was eating with people that were rejected by society. And what Jesus was saying is that there is more joy out of recovering something that is lost than there is in heaven for those who have never been lost. More joy because a person has returned back. They've come back. So think about that as we live our lives. Next week, we're going to take a look at the parable of the sower. Tomorrow, we will do a devotion. There are 2 more devotions left in my tenure and 1 more Bible study, and I'm looking forward to being with you those 2 times. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Stay well, stay safe, and God bless you.